Well, good evening, everyone. How's everyone doing? Welcome. This is Puneet again. I think I know most of you, and I hope most of us are familiar with each other. We haven't done wine tasting virtually in a while, so I was very, very happy when we reached out to Ricky Parker with Shockoe, and we were able to actually secure them uh, for this wine tasting. I know their schedule is very busy as the season is on with a lot of special events, but we're thrilled to have Ricky Parker with Shockoe Wine taking us through this wonderful tasting. Couple of things as a reminder, just housekeeping notes. This is a very engaging session as usual. Ricky has a wonderful slide that he plans on sharing with us, kind of taking us back to Shockoe's history and how the company is doing and how the company came along. So if you have any questions, please feel free to send me or send us through the chat. We both will be monitoring the chat function as well. And I hope in addition to enjoying this wonderful wine and tasting, we'll learn a little more about Shockoe's future as well, which is very exciting. So without any further delay, I would like to invite Ricky Parker with Shockoe Wine. Ricky, welcome.
Thank you, Praneet, and good evening, everyone. I hope everyone's having a great day, and I just want to thank you for joining me this evening. And I'm really looking forward to telling you about Shockoe Wine, really explaining our brand story and our history of how we got to where we're at now, as well as the exciting things we have to come in the near future. What I'm going to do right now, I'm going to share a slide and just really start to go through who we are as a brand. All right. Can everyone see?
Yep.
All right. So I want to start out by introducing the founders. So I'm one of three co-founders for Shockoe Wine. My other two co-founders are Chris Randolph and Steve Johnson III. The three of us connected. Actually, Chris was the glue that kind of connected us. But the special thing about the three of us, we all have backgrounds in food and beverage. And with having backgrounds in food and beverage, each of us have a different specialty or experience that we were able to kind of bring to the table to really make this a very unique experience. I definitely take some time to kind of even talk about my background. Currently, I'm a professor at Virginia Union University as well as Virginia Commonwealth University. I teach marketing and advertising as well as hip hop studies. Prior to me being a professor, a lot of my time was spent consulting. Something I still do, but like a lot of the consulting I was doing early on out of college was around the spirits industry. I had the pleasure of working with Moet Hennessy, Louis Vuitton, around 2010. While working with them, I was able to help with grassroots marketing for Belvedere Vodka, Hennessy, as well as Moet Chandon. From there, I was able to work with Campari America, Sky Spirits on some on and off premise work, as well as working with Diageo once they acquired Nuvo. So, with my experience, I have a grasp really of the distribution three tiers as you go through each state, as well as this whole thing of understanding accounts, marketing, branding, and this whole thing of just how do we create excitement behind the brand. My other two partners, their experience kind of really helps complement mine. Steve Johnson, who I'll talk about first, he's currently account director at the Martin Agency. Prior to his time at the Martin, Steve was doing accounts for Applebee's, and prior to Applebee's, he was head of national accounts for McDonald's. My last partner, Chris, he is really the hospitality foodie of the three of us. With Chris, he was a restaurateur in the Richmond area for a few years, and his family actually has a history of agriculture within the Richmond region. And so you may be wondering, so how did the three of us meet? And it all started over a glass of whiskey. So Uncle Nearest Premium Whiskey, I know prior there was a tasting with Uncle Nearest, and for us as a brand, Uncle Nearest is very near and dear to us. Uh, Being so for a lot of different reasons. One reason, one of my mentors, Kenny Burns, he's a part owner of Uncle Nearest. And when Uncle Nearest finally got distribution in Virginia, this was kind of the first project the three of us really rallied behind and kind of saw an opportunity with. This was kind of early 2020, and around this time, Chris believed that myself, him, and Steve had an opportunity just with our backgrounds to kind of do something within the space. At the time, we saw an opportunity with Uncle Nearest where they were just entering the Virginia market, and there was little to no knowledge about the brand. We started really pursuing the brand to really be their agency of record. In that process, just prior to COVID starting, in that first quarter of 2020, we were able to get Uncle Nearest into 15 different accounts within Central Virginia. From there, it kind of served as the springboard for us thinking about what are we doing next, because we came to a crossroad where we were working with Uncle Nearest, trying to really figure out how we could help them out as a brand. But at the same time, I was doing some research on my own, just really about winemaking in Virginia, the process of starting your own wine brand, and just really exploring like my aspirations to really, really be in the space as an owner. As I was doing this research, I started to share with my partner, Steve and Chris. I wasn't really sure if this was something we were ready for or prepared for, but there was a lot of information kind of pointing me to the importance of place. Virginia is the number two region within America for winemaking. In that, I saw the opportunity if we could really partner find a partner who has established themselves within the region. It could kind of really help us understand how we could grow a brand as well as build a reputation of quality, craftsmanship, and just great wine. And so with this, it had a turning point where one of the things I can say is a godsend or a blessing is having great mentors. And I really discussed with my mentor the crossroad we were at, where we didn't know where we should put our energy. And pursuing Uncle Nearest more and figuring out how to really become their agency of record, or we should really kind of spend a lot of time really exploring what do we need to do to really actually start a wine brand. And so for us, um, my mentor really pushed the whole idea of ownership and really going for that. And so we started to take that journey. And so for us, with starting the brand, we really started to think about if we start a wine label, what are we going to call it? And so this is really I have to kind of give some background on my partner Chris Randolph. A few years ago, he owned a restaurant in Shockoe Bottom called Shockoe Whiskey and Wine. This restaurant really was a staple within the city for young professionals. In it, even before I met Chris, I just knew of the restaurant. I thought the branding for the restaurant was incredible. One of the things we were talking about, because shortly once COVID started happening a little bit before that, Chris closed this restaurant. And I still believe there was some brand equity in the name Shockoe Whiskey and Wine. Whiskey was something we love. Where like Uncle Nearest brought us together, but I thought it was an opportunity where, as we're exploring this whole thing of getting into wine, why don't we use the name Shockoe? And this is a quote from my partner Steve. Although we all were raised in Richmond, the three of us have come together with very life experience and perspectives. But even with our different backgrounds, we each share a personal connection to Shockoe Bottom. Chris with his restaurant, me with being an alumnus of Virginia Union University, a college that was founded in Shockoe Bottom, and Steve, someone who works at the Martin Agency, arguably one of the best advertising agencies in the country, and their headquarters is in Shockoe Bottom. And so for all of us, we saw a personal connection with that, and we felt that all of our personal stories could really kind of be in this product. One of the things we wanted to do was really bottle up the great experience that Shockoe Whiskey and Wine once had, and kind of figure out like how can we savor that and save that experience so people can still have it and it can still live on. So creating our own table. For us, it's a lot more than wine. Well, it's bigger than wine. One of the things we really wanted to do with this venture is really figure out how can we use wine as a vehicle to really help our community. And so, with that, our core values that really guide all our decision making or what we're doing, our community, inclusiveness, and education. Um, we started this process as a brand in 2020 at the beginning of COVID, but we've been in market since May 2021. Since May 2021, we have sold over 1,200 bottles direct to consumer. Our business model up to this point has been direct to consumer because we felt like us owning our supply chain and gathering this data will help us make educated decisions about where we should go next and how we can be in the right markets. Through that, we've just been in a process of really growing from there. But one of the things I can really kind of speak of the core values and this whole idea of creating our own table. Over Labor Day weekend, we were able to partner with a local fraternity in Richmond, Virginia, Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated. And we were able to partner with them on a jazz and wine fundraiser. And with the fundraiser, we were able to raise $8,000 for college scholarships for Richmond students to attend college. And we're just very passionate about using wine as a vehicle to really build bridges in other ways. And so for us, we really believe education is very important. The three of us have seen how education or just the ability to go to college and further ourselves has blessed us with opportunities where we want to be in the position to do the same. Another thing we also see within the hospitality or food and beverage space, there's a lack of representation, not just for African Americans, but just with a lot of different groups you kind of can think of where we just kind of want to figure out how can we create an environment or be a brand that we're a voice for everyone. And so in that, a big piece of a brand, I guess, slogan or a motto we constantly say is cheers to you and cheers to the culture. We feel that culture isn't just one thing, it's a combination of many things: education, art, music, community, food. There's a lot of different things that make culture its thing, and we really try to embrace that with our programming and the organizations we partner with. Um, Celebrating Richmond with every pour. For us, our goal is to grow as a brand where no matter where you see Shockoe, wherever you see it at, Common House Richmond, where I'm at right now, or even if you're in another country, because our goal is to really grow to be a global or international brand. But when you see the label, we want people to think of Richmond, Virginia. For the three of us, Richmond is a dear place to us, and we wanted to create a brand, and we're still striving to establish a brand that allows people to see how special Richmond is. So every pour, we're just paying homage to Richmond, to our past, to our present, to the future of the city, and with things to come. Uh, and through that, I think it's created a lot of opportunities of where we're going next. Where Common House Richmond is really our first retail account. Uh, Starting next week, we will be in Wegmans and Short Pump as well as Midlothian. And so now we're in the second phase of our distribution strategy where we're starting to really pursue retail more and strategically we're really focused on positioning ourselves within accounts that really reflect the lifestyle and the prestige as a brand that we want people to see. If you haven't tasted our 2019 vintage of the red blend yet, I think once you taste it, you'll kind of understand everything that we want to encompass as a brand. With our 2019 vintage red blend, it was something that we took a lot of time thinking about. We kind of really thought about how we really could enter the market. We really felt that we could have done something sparkling. We could have even started out with a rosé, whether it was still or sparkling. But we felt like if we started out with something that had a little bit more variety, that even as a red wine, it would kind of establish us more in industry. We felt like starting with a red blend, it was going to kind of really be perfect because we had a lot of ideas around it. When we launched the Red Brand, it was going into the summer, so we saw the opportunity with food pairings. This wine pairs perfect with steak, lamb, cheeseburgers, salami. So there was a lot of things we saw even going to the summer with our marketing and positioning to help people understand or put in context, like how can I enjoy this wine? Another thing, well, opportunity we saw with the wine is just all our backgrounds in working in food and beverage. We saw that the wine could be a perfect chaser or mixer for cocktails. And so a cocktail that we now have that's a signature cocktail at Common House on their menu is our Shockoe Sangria that actually includes Uncle Nearest premium whiskey. And so even with our cocktails, we're figuring out a way to kind of keep our relationship with Uncle Nearest going, as well as showing the variety or the versatility of the wine. One of the things that we're kind of really knowledgeable of is that a lot of times I think with drinking wine, it could be a very scary experience for some people. I think with it or someone who's not a wine enthusiast or hasn't studied wine, it could be intimidating at some points. And so with for us, we really want to kind of change the context with that and kind of really make wine very approachable. And so even through the cocktail selections of our Shockoe Sangria, we also have our own version of a New York Sour. We use our wine as well. And so like even with these cocktails, we see an opportunity of making it more approachable, but also creating something that people can kind of understand. Something else we've been doing recently, since we've been direct to consumer, we've been doing a lot of events, and events have really been helping us really educate consumers and our audience about the brand, as well as giving them an opportunity to really, try out the product and really see, what is all the, the excitement about. And like with the events we're doing, we're really, we're seeing the opportunity with art. We see that with pairing with artists, curators, and galleries, this really helped us out. So far, we've partnered with two galleries in Richmond, Black Iris and the Bland Gallery, as well as we just partnered with a gallery and curator, Home DC, this past weekend for a private mixer we just did. So with our business model, it's a little bit unorthodox. Where in the state of Virginia, it's definitely a destination state when you think of wine. There's so many wineries, and it becomes this whole experience if you think about driving into the mountains or driving into wine country. For us, we were kind of understanding like how do we create this excitement where we can get people to want to go to a website, order and get the wine shipped directly to them. And so that's kind of in a nutshell, just where we're at as a brand and kind of what we've been doing over the last 5 months. Right now, I would like to transition and introduce our resident sommelier, Chauncey Jenkins. Chauncey is the general manager of Common House Richmond. He's also a close friend of mine, where as we were going through the process, or even as I was doing my initial research just around starting a wine brand, Chauncey was very influential, was just providing me resources or pointing me in the right direction. And so now I'm going to transition out, and the next voice you're going to hear is going to be Chauncey. So here you go.
That's a great picture. That was me without a beard. I was I look like a young gerbil in that picture, but I'm really happy to be here with you all. Thank you again. My name is Chauncey Jenkins. I currently serve as the general manager of Common House Number Two in Richmond. A very long background in food and beverage. I've been in a kitchen since I was 4 years old. My dad was a chef. My mom was a nurse, so there really wasn't, and they named me Chauncey, so there really wasn't any other way I was not going to be in hospitality, just by name alone. What I really appreciate, thank Ricky for having me be here. Kind of journeyed through a lot of different places, but ultimately um, ended up attending the Cornell University School of Hotel Administration, which is now Cornell College of Business. And that's where a lot of my wine training began and my professional journey and foray into the food and beverage industry. So I'm going to go over a couple of different classic tasting things that we're looking for. And I'll talk to you a little bit about some scientific things. Hopefully, we'll keep this fun and energetic. I'm not sure if we have this open for questions or anything like that, but I do like to be as interactive as possible. So if there is a way to send anything in, I'd love to answer any of those questions. But if you do have, I'm not sure if everybody has a glass with them, but if you do have a glass, we are looking at the 2019 Shockoe Red Blend, and there is a classic. Pretty much what we look forward to doing is, oh, cool. All right, perfect. There we go. I was getting real scared of looking at my face that long. There's kind of an order of operations that we go through in tasting wine, and I don't even like to call it tasting. I like to call it an inspection of wine, if you will. The first thing that I love to tell folks primarily is to make sure that we are not we try our best to make sure that we're not holding glasses by the bowl. We always want to make sure that we're trying our best to hold glasses by the stem, especially if this is white wine, but even more so if this is something along the lines of Burgundy or any grape that doesn't have a lot of tannic structure to it. We don't want to overheat that in any particular way. This is the exact opposite thing you would want to do for something like brandy, where the warmer the glass is, the more it brings out the aromas. What we're really seeking to do here is aerate this wine, get it to a level where we can develop an understanding of it and make a conclusion about it. So that's particularly what we're looking for. So the first thing, we're going to make sure we have our glass by the stem, and we're going to look at this wine. Particularly, there's a right way to do this, and there is a way that isn't necessarily wrong, but it is somebody who isn't your friend who is telling you to do it. So anyone who tells you to take a glass of wine, hold it up to the light, and look through it, delete that person from your phone. They are not your friend. They should not be in your contacts. They do not want to see you succeed. We like to see people succeed here, so let's get that out of the way. Two things: we're not holding by the bowl, and people who tell us to look through the glass up, those are not our friends. Really, what we want to do to see the true color of a wine and what we're inspecting is a couple things. This is going to tell me a little bit about what type of grape this is, how heavy or how thick the skins are, and age is a little bit of what we look for. So I normally like to have a sheet of paper that has a little white background, or a white tablecloth, or anything that is white for me to compare against. So I will then take this and I will hold it against the glass, and I'm actually going to look through my glass, and I'm at it like so. And a couple things that I'm looking at in the center where it is most dense, that is going to tell me a little bit about, is this a thick skin grape? Is it light? If this were something, can I see through this, right? And if in the center where that density is concentrated, I can see through it, that would lead me to conclude that it is definitely something like a Gamay. That is something like Pinot Noir. That is something like Val d'Aiguille, like anything along those lines where it's like very, very light, even some Syrahs. And it might tell me a little bit about if this was something that was aged stainless versus in oak too, to give me a little bit of that indication there. But the next thing that I'm really trying to see is what's happening on that rim, because that's going to be the indicator of how old a wine is. If we're looking at white wines in particular, what I'm going to see, particularly if we're looking at old Chardonnays or we're looking at old Semillon, that wine is going to lose a lot of its like bright hue. It's going to lose some of that pale straw color that you see, and it's going to move us deeper into very golden colors. I like to tell people that it moves from the Hall's wrapper to the actual Hall's cough drop that is on the inside of it. Like that's what we're looking at, and that's for white wine. For red wine, what happens is it loses a bit of its luster. It loses a lot of its color. And on the outermost rim, I can tell that a wine is, if it's starting to hit that 10-year mark, then it's going to start to move closer to being less sanguine and more brown, right? So it's going to lose a lot of its vibrancy. So the first thing that we're going to do once we get this glass that we're holding by our stem and not holding up to the light is looking down against a white background and just making some immediate conclusions about what is going on in this glass. Should somebody give me a glass of wine and they not tell me what it is, or I go to a place and someone else is so nice to give me wine for free, then we want to make sure that they're not trying to poison us. So this is the first step in that conclusion, right? The second thing that we're going to do is start to swirl our little baby. Now, I'm not sure where everybody is in terms of swirling here. There are a couple tactics that I keep. You want to try to keep the glass as straight as possible and add just enough force to it for it to swirl around. The best way that I tell people to do this is to start on a table or on a surface and remember how you first felt when they tried to teach you how to write in cursive and you were just like doing these spirals over and over again. If you weren't one of the lucky people who had to learn how to write in cursive, and the first thing you got was a text message, I'm very sorry, but that was a great exercise for all of us, and it was extremely creative. But you want to make these small circles on the table, and I'm going to push this down like so. And this is working some air into the wine. What we're doing is increasing the probability of more of this wine's aeration, right? We want to increase that probability by increasing the surface area that the wine can actually interact with in the glass. As my good friend Bartholomew Broadbent says, we can talk about decanting all day, but the most change in a wine happens in the glass. It doesn't happen in the decanter. It doesn't happen in any other aeration. So this is the best opportunity for us to start to work up those aromas. Now, once we've swirled, to get some air introduced into this, to open this wine up. And the reason we want to open this wine up is because it's been caged for so long and in there is developing some form of CO2. So we want to let that gas out. In fact, when you first pour wine into a glass and it bubbles up a little bit, like not carbonation, but those little bubbles that you see on the side, that's showing you that there's still a little bit of latent CO2 that's in there. So we want to get that out because that's actually suppressing the aromas that we're searching for. And it's going to suppress some of the flavors. When you talk to a lot of people that say wine tastes like wine, that's usually the first thing that they haven't done. They haven't like opened it up. And that's not untrue. Wine does taste like wine, but it tastes like a lot of other things too. And that's what we want to try. So the next thing that we're going to do after we first looked at this wine, and then we've swirled this wine. So I like to think of it as we see, swirl, and then we start to smell this wine. We're going to take in the aromas of this wine. There are a lot of folks who will tell you to put your nose all the way down in the glass. I would be very hesitant to do that. I tell people the same thing with whiskey. I would be very hesitant to do that off the jump. And I would be extremely hesitant to do it if you were drinking anything that has Cabernet Franc, Merlot, Petit Verdot, any of that stuff in here. So this wine, definitely not this wine. This is not what you want to do. You don't want to run right into it, sticking your nose all the way into it. However, you want to take a little bit, some small whiffs. You can waft the aromas up to your nose so that you can start to find out, hey, what are the small things that we can define? This is defined as orthonasal like smell, right? So basically we're figuring out what this taste is through our nose. 90% of taste is olfactory. The rest of it is gustatory. So that is what we're looking for. The next thing that I'm going to do is now start to stick my nose a little bit deeper into this glass. And we're looking for 3 types of aromas here. They're primary aromas, secondary aromas, and tertiary aromas. There's one thing that I'm going to tell you before we even jump into this. If I have looked at this wine when I first got it and I looked at the outermost rim and I started to see that it was browning, I am already expecting tertiary aromas here because tertiary aromas have a lot to do with some of barrel, but some of how long the wine has been aged, right? So let's walk through what these words are. So primary aromas are pretty much what you're going to get from a young wine. A young wine that might be one note that doesn't have much complexity to it, maybe the only thing you're going to get is primary aromas. That's anything that is coming from the grape itself, right? Like what aromas are being introduced from this grape. So we're looking at anything that's like fruit forward that you're looking at. That's all of those fruit notes or any floral notes that you're going to smell. Those are pretty much lumped into what we're looking at primary. So in here, what I smell is a lot of preserved fruit, particularly. So not just anything that's fresh with like bright flesh and citrus. I'm smelling something that seems like it not quite stewed, because I don't get a little stewed always has a little bit of tertiary notes in there too. But I'm getting something where the fruit still smells kind of fresh, but there's also like a little bit of like confectionery sugar. That's the only way that I can kind of explain like what that smells like. So think like nice jams, think raspberry compotes, things along those lines, what you'll get out of here. I'm getting dark berries, particularly things along the currant line. Now, as I start to swirl this a little bit more, and I go deeper, the second thing that I'm going to get is the secondary aromas. And this ends up being, it's a little bit easier to spot in white wine because those aromas have a lot to do with the yeast that's in those wines. And a lot of white wines, particularly, spend a good amount more time seeing some lees aging. So that's the spent yeast cells, and they're stirred in there. They usually bring around like toasted bread notes, but a lot of nutty notes that you'll find. Particularly in red wine, what you see are things along the lines of cedar and spice. So in this wine that I'm smelling right now, I do get a lot of like wood notes here. I particularly go more to cedar, although less so than I would get from like a Willamette Valley Pinot Noir. Get little flavors like little smells of like kind of wet wood, particularly though, like fresh after a rain. And autumn leaves are just like something right along the bat that I get in this wine. As we continue to go with the aromas, we are spending a long time on smelling, but again, you can always smell more than you can taste is kind of like the rule of thumb that we have here. We move into tertiary notes, and for this one, I'm going to put my glass down because the first time someone told me the words forest floor, or they started saying things like manure or dung, or they started to say that something smelled fungal, I was immediately like, how do you even sell wine like this? What are you doing? Why are you going and talking to anybody's table side? I'm like, I don't want to think about fungus while I'm eating foie. Like that's just particularly not the thing. So we try to work that out a little bit more. When we get to tertiary notes, these are usually reserved for wines that have had a little bit of age on them. Just because a wine is old doesn't necessarily mean that it is indicative of a quality wine, but it does mean that if there are notes of all three of these things happening, then the wine does have a bit of complexity to it. And we start to smell things instead of fungal. Hey, thank you, Jerry. Instead of fungal notes, I start to think of things like, this reminds me of truffle, or this reminds me of a very particular mushroom. This one in particular is maitake mushroom all day for me. I will cook this up and put it with a little bit of garlic, shallot, white wine, and fresh herb, and that is going to be something. Finish it with chive, chervil, tarragon, parsley, and that's great. That's what this smells like to me, right? But you get deeper into things like wet mulch, or like freshly trodden path by a horse from 3 stables away. Like it can get that specific. Probably shouldn't get that specific. People will think that you're very weird, so we probably shouldn't go that far. But it is helpful. I tell people that it is helpful for you. Anything that you can relate as much to something that it reminds you of in childhood, think of that specific thing. Like what we talk about, there's an Instagram account for wine. You all should follow it if you're on Insta. It's called Fresh Cut Garden Hose. And it's this lady, she does these fun paintings of these wine notes that come from like decanter or wine and spirits, how people like use all of these poetic devices to describe wine and these ostentatious ways in a way, but they are the calling cards of how we remember things. And the more you can attach like flavor profiles, or the more you can attach certain smells to things that remind you of childhood or things that you're familiar with, it'll be easier for you to go into the world of wine and enjoy it, and it will open yourself up. So when I do these tastings, I like to make them as no frills as possible. And I can go into the buzzwords, but I like to talk about what is most familiar to you. What do you think of? And as we start to walk down, like what's primary, secondary, and tertiary, what are the things that you find to remind you of your youth? Write those things down, and then we work the buzzwords in, and then we can check on winefolly.com and see if there's some particularly interesting notes there. One of the things that I do want to talk about with that is tertiary notes have a lot to do not just with the aging process, but notes that are imparted from the barrel. Particularly want to speak about that in this wine. And we'll do that as we get into a sip. So the next thing, we've smelled this thing to death at this point. We've looked at it. We've talked about fungus way too long, way longer than we should have. So now we're going to taste this thing, and hopefully it is something that's enjoyable to you, that doesn't remind you of bad memories from your childhood. So first thing we'll do, I tell people to start with small sips and then kind of do the slight inhale where you'll lean forward and kind of like swish around your tongue, and then do one big sip. When we are analyzing a couple of things here, we want to know what the flavor profiles are. We want to know what the structure of the wine is, and then what the length of time it's actually spending in your mouth. So each wine has a beginning, middle, or end. If you cannot clearly define if they do, it might not be a wine that's extremely complex, right? But what we're walking through. So you make this sound like a fish gargling, and it's a great party trick. It's amazing. But we're still aerating a little bit of the wine when we do that, and you always want to lean forward a bit to get it there. First thing that I'm getting here is a lot of the berry off the bat, but I'm getting a lot of the tannic structure of this wine. When I speak to tannin, that's the enzyme that's found in the skins of grape. I like to tell people that it gives you a little bit of that mouth pucker. It feels like there's like sometimes it's a little chewy, like there's a piece of this wine that's sticking with you. This isn't quite chewy, but it's close there. And I'm also noticing that it's, although it's tannic and like heavy in terms of that structure, it isn't the fullest body wine that I've tasted in my life, right? Like, so it's not overwhelming, right? It's not what I would say cloying to the palate. When we think of big, like Napa Cabernets, we think of things that are extremely cloying to the palate. And there are a couple of reasons for that. One of the reasons here is that this is aged in 30% neutral oak and 70% or 30% French oak, 70% neutral oak. Neutral oak means that the barrels have been turned probably more than 20 times to the point where the oak isn't imparting anything into it. So it's not imparting any tannin. Like, tannin can both come from the skin of the grape, and it can also come from the wood in the barrel. And it isn't imparting any flavor. What we notice with a lot of, let's say, American oak, if we were to do this, American white oak imparts a lot of dill and a lot of vanilla, like right off the back. In fact, one of the tannins that is found in that wood is called vanillin. What we're getting here from this French oak, though, is a couple of things. I know I have like very strong grapes in here. Petit Verdot, particularly Petit Verdot in Virginia, took about 30 years to mature before we even really knew what to do with it in this climate. So there are two grapes in here that are like Virginia's claim to fame: Cabernet Franc, Petit Verdot, and then if we were to start talking about whites, we have Petit Manseng and Viognier. But Cabernet Franc in Virginia can literally be tested on an exam at this point. Like, we have our own terroir that produces a particular type. You'll find mostly here, what you're looking at is the small component called pyrazines. It's a compound that's found in the wine, and it lets off this bell pepper-like flavor. But the older it gets, it ends up tasting like jalapenos. I get that muted note here, but it tastes more like the skin of a sweet piquillo pepper than anything else. The other thing about French oak, though, is that it's going to take away from the astringency of a lot of these grapes. So I added that it's adding tannin, but like some of these bigger, bolder grapes like Cabernet Franc, You're going to get something that's a lot more smooth, a lot more approachable on the palate, and that's exactly what's happening here. Had this been aged in something like new American oak, it would probably be a lot heavier, and it would probably be a lot more forceful, and it would definitely be chewy. So think of, if you ever like chewed a grape skin and how long it takes for you to actually get through that thing. That's kind of like what chewy tannins end up feeling like. And it also has a little bit of, it also feels a little bit like how sorghum feels in your mouth too, like where it's like very, very viscous. So now we're going to take like a very deep sip of this. Granted, this is 13% ABV. That's correct, right, Ricky? We're 13% here. So I see a lot of screens. I don't want to lose any of you, so don't take the biggest sip in the world, but definitely take a hefty sip. Now, as this opens, I'm getting a lot more of that jam. Getting a little bit more of a savory finish here. Getting kind of like bright herbs, things that I would get from like herbs de Provence, slight grass. It's like really, really fun. I think about what I want with this, since I have like a little bit of that slight bitterness on the end. I like to think of things that are like smoky and sweet, like jerky would be something that's here. I think this would be really, really great for barbecue, things like brisket, precisely, but also for like very heavy cigars, or cigars that are cedar wrapped. Like this is like immediately what I think, that have like a little bit of spice, pepper, and then like a ton of fruit that's going with it. The last thing that we do in this, after this tasting piece of it, is come to what we say a conclusion, or we basically like grade this wine. We make a statement about it, because that's apparently what we have to do as human beings. We have to have opinions on a lot of things. So we're going to have an opinion on this wine. Ricky, don't worry. I really like this wine, so I'm not going to say a different one than I normally would. But really, this is to give us a less of an opinion and more of, this is what's going to determine if I feel like the value proposition of a wine meets me at a proper place, right? This is what tells me if something drinks like a $300 cab, but I can buy it at $80. Like going through this process, and I determine whether something is one note, whether it has value, whether it has ageability. And really what we're trying to find out is balance. I'm looking for, are there multiple notes here and aromas here? Are they in tune or in line with each other in a way that one isn't overpowering the other? Big heavy red wines have the tendency to be so tannic that a lot of the fruit itself can't come through. And what happens is we have what we call ferrous wines, where a lot of the raw materials that you can find in this soil end up being on your palate, and it tastes a lot like iron does, or like the first time like you've like tasted blood, right? And you can't quite get past that until the wine has aged a bit. The tannic structure balances out. It's the difference between like recording a song, mixing a song, and mastering a song. And for a lot of like heavily like things with heavy tannic structures, or things that are out of balance, sometimes the barrel aging itself won't work, and sometimes it's not the bottle. It just takes time to get it to the place where it needs to be to settle. So now we've already looked at a couple things. I know that because this outer rim is still like very like bright, and it's vibrant, like this outer rim is electric. It is dense in the center. This is a young wine. I know that this is a young wine. And outside of the vintage, I would know that it's a young wine. The next thing, I'm still getting a lot of primary fruit and aroma, so that's telling me that it is a young wine. But what I am also getting here is a little bit of that like malt cedar thing going on. I'm getting a little bit of mushroom here, and I'm getting a lot of herb every time I have like a new sip, both from like a small sip to a like full big gulp. There's something different happening to me when I'm drinking this wine, and that's amazing. That tells me that this isn't a wine that's one note. It's here to stay. It does have like a little bit of ageability. It still does have a little bit of that tannic structure, right? There's still like some chewiness to this. It's not like it's not as chewy as, let's say, like Stag's Leap would be, but it definitely does have some residual pieces there. So that tells me that it does have some time for that to balance out a little bit more. So that is an indicator of ageability in this wine. That tells me that in a couple more years, I'm going to get to a place where, one, I know that this isn't extremely full bodied on the palate right now. So I'm going to get to something where it starts to probably in about, I'd give this about 6 more years, and it's going to be velvety on the palate. It's just going to feel, it's going to damn near feel like silk. Part of my French there, but sometimes I get really excited about wine, and you just got to give it its proper due. And the last thing that we're going to talk about is the finish. So I'll take one last sip. Tons of violets coming out now. That's amazing. How long does it stay with you? And we talked about orthonasal, and there's the other piece of it that's retronasal. So after you take a sip and you swallow it, it's that last inhale. Are there still things going on in my mouth that I can't explain, but I kind of like it? Like that's what we're looking for. So now I'm at this point where I can like taste this wine. My retronasal gives me this kind of like sweet tart berry, kind of reminds me of like Nerds or like this like any little like small hard candies that you have. And this is a beautiful wine. It has ageability here. It's striking. It isn't extremely like overbearing to your palate. It has like, it hits me in a lot of the different places. I'm looking for bitter, sweet, spicy and savory. It has a lot of baking spice, but it isn't like a lot of like what I would say is cooking spice. It has savory notes in terms of like that fun little like retronasal herb de Provence thing that you're going to get there. The sweetness we're getting from a little bit of that like jam, but we have like very tart berries that are coming through here. So it's not a compote that is like riddled with sugar by any means. This is a beautiful wine, and that's my small class on taste.
Chauncey, I must say, I learned a lot of things. This was very, very informative, and it's like entertaining at the same time. So I encourage, like I know Jerry had to leave, but Jerry was the first one who was curious, where are you buying your grapes from?
Oh.
Like,
So I can definitely answer that question. So we source our grapes from a winery in Afton, Virginia called Veritas, and we've been able to establish an incredible partnership with them. Even right now, we're going through harvest, and so even this time around, we're getting to learn a lot about harvesting and being hands-on with that process. But we've had an incredible relationship with them. Initially, with our relationship, Veritas had a brand called True Heritage, and initially our partnership started with them. But just from the success we've had initially, we've kind of just grown as an overall partner with the parent company Veritas, and really just excited about what's up next for us. So we have this 2019 vintage out. That's incredible. We're actually sold out right now. We're actually going through the process this week of bottling our reserve barrel, and we should have that back on our site coming early to mid October. Also, starting next week, next Friday, Saturday, we're going to be in Wegmans. So I just want to say that again, and we're preparing to release a sparkling rosé as well.
thank you so much, Ricky. And I encourage all the members, like I know, you're enjoying the wine, but feel free to unmute yourself. And please, Chauncey and Ricky are here. If you have any comments, compliments, or anything you'd like to ask about the wine and the company, this is open right now. So please, cheers to everyone.
You say the company started basically this year, and yet the wine you're selling in the Shockoe is vintage 2019. So that wine was sitting somewhere else for a while.
Yeah,
Where did you get it?
yeah. So we're able. This is how like we actually started 2020, and so in it, We took advantage of the 2019 harvest that Veritas already had going into 2020. And so we were actually, the timing of the conversations we had with them just kind of synced where we were able to kind of take advantage of that with the sourcing process. And so like with sourcing grapes, it's a whole thing of just buying wine in bulk. And so now we're at this place where initially we were just starting out with 100 cases. And so with that, it became one thing, but we've gone through 100 cases in like less than 5 months. And so now we're at this place where we're trying to project product we'll need for 2022. And so just with that is also it's like what this is called, it's called a custom crush relationship. And so in it, we're able to actually work with them on it, but with it, we're able to kind of give our input on like the palette or what we ultimately want like the taste profile to be. And so with that, we were able to kind of do this with the 2019 vintage where they had several barrels, and we were actually able to go through the process of tasting the barrels and really deciding which one we felt fit, the profile we wanted as a brand or what makes sense for us overall.
Yeah, so they're not selling the same wine under
No.
a different name.
Nah, this is a totally different process. Like we went through with it.
Does the wine age at Veritas? Thank you for both your talks. They were so interesting. We learned a lot.
Yes. Initially, we the 2019 wine we aged at Veritas. Now we have a warehouse in Waynesboro, where like we're doing a lot of our bottling and storage and stuff there as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You had me at Uncle Nearest. I love Uncle Nearest. We had this, we had this tasting last year, and I became a big fan. I wear the branded face mask at work every day. We love it. So thank you.
And the wine's great. Thank you.
Oh no, thank you for your feedback. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Do you all have a tasting room in Richmond or a place that somebody can come by and buy the wines from you all directly?
Coming very soon, very, very soon. We're actually in the process of finalizing a deal with a location. So if you follow us on social media, just follow Shockoe Wine on Instagram. We're going to be making that announcement sometime in October. That's what we're planning to do. But the goal is to have a tasting room. We actually see with having a tasting room located in Richmond, it will kind of give us more mobility. Just what we've seen in like pop-up events or like the gallery events we've been doing. That in-person interaction is definitely something that we haven't had yet, and we kind of see the added bonus with implementing that now as well.
Where do you all tend to hang out? Are you like in Cary Street area? Are you more in the Fan or toward VCU? Where do you tend to?
Well, it's going to be downtown. I can tell you that. Very close to Common House, and very close to the Jackson Ward area. So it's definitely going to be accessible if you're in the downtown area. Where one of the things we definitely want to take advantage of is First Fridays, and the location we're looking at kind of really falls perfect in that area where we're able to implement just taking advantage of art, because First Fridays is in Richmond during like the art district. It's a lot of art galleries, a lot of different shops and boutiques. And it becomes a day every month where people just come out and it's a lot of energy. And so we kind of see that as another opportunity where we're able to introduce the brand and kind of have like more of a presence in Richmond.
Fantastic. I'm from Richmond, but I live in Northern Virginia right now.
Okay, what part?
Well, I grew up in the south, over on the north side by what was formerly the Richmond Memorial Hospital and the baseball field and all that, Ginter Park, all that kind of stuff.
Awesome.
Went to St. Gertrude High School. Woo-hoo.
Nice. Love St. Gertrude.
Go Gertie.
And then Ricky and Chauncey, I know Paul had asked, like, what grapes could you remind? What grapes are in the wine?
So in this wine, we have a Petit Verdot, a Merlot, and a Cabernet Franc. I believe Chauncey would probably say the same. The Petit Verdot is really the star out of this mix. Petit Verdot is a very popular grape in Virginia. It's probably one of the best grapes coming out of Virginia. We kind of think like what makes Virginia wine or Virginia harvest different is really the Petit Verdot. And so with that, I think that's kind of what really brings this blend together. It really helps it stand out.
Yeah, I would definitely say that. I would say the Petit Verdot is like muting. That's why I'm getting like less of the pyrazine from the Cabernet Franc, because Virginia Cabernet Franc tends to have like a little bit more of that like bell pepper thing. Like the Petit Verdot is like morphing that into like a sweet piquillo or pepperdew pepper, right? And then it's giving me a lot of like those like fun floral notes. But like Petit Verdot, like I said, it took us about in Virginia, like 30 years. These are all Bordeaux grapes, by the way. Like I want to make that very clear. So these are all grapes that can be found traditionally in a Bordeaux blend. So Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, Merlot, Petit Verdot, like Malbec, right? Like those are all things that would normally be found in a Bordeaux blend. And they are reserved for blending usually. But if you walk around Virginia, there are a couple places that are like doing this very well, and see if you can find some single varietal Petit Verdot. Michael Shaps like really gets it right. I know everybody like knows Michael because Michael makes wine for so many different people behind the scenes, but like the Petit Verdot in this wine is doing the Lord's work. It's insane.
I appreciate that.
And Ricky, I didn't know if you get a chance to read Elizabeth Kelleher's comment in the chat box. I think that was very well, summarized her childhood memory. Did you see how she had summarized your wine to a childhood memory?
I think that's like great. I think that's a great feedback of just even like the memories where like the whole purpose of what Chauncey was talking. If you really go through the process of not just jumping in and just tasting the wine, but really starting to like um, starting to really get an understanding of the body and like just the makeup of it, you'll kind of understand. It's going to really take you to a place. So I'm glad like we're able to connect the memories with the smells and like because I think with you once you do that, now you're able to kind of set this apart from any other red wine you drink or even a red blend.
Well, this has been very, very entertaining session to say the least. And I would, encourage all our members, if you want to say thank you or you have any other comments, please feel free to share with both Ricky and Chauncey. And I think, Ricky, you'll have a few more fans you added for Shockoe Bottom Wine. And we look forward to, there's Common House in Charlottesville, and we look forward to actually sometime visiting Common House in Richmond as well. Yeah,
Please come down. I would love to have you all.
absolutely.
So
Again,
I see it's a question about Northern Virginia. So the goal is with Wegmans, they want us to start in Central Virginia and then move out. We actually had a meeting with like the national beverage director, and they loved the wine. And so in it, the goal definitely is to move out up into Northern Virginia as well as into the Tidewater area, like later into the year, going into 2022.
Do you have other wines besides this red blend?
We're preparing to release a sparkling rosé going into the holiday. Our goal is to have that out kind of to coincide Thanksgiving, Christmas, as well as New Year's. And so that's the next release we're preparing for.
and again, thank you so much, Ricky, for your time, Chauncey as well, and all the members. We wish to continue, and I know you're going to enjoy Shockoe wine for many, many days. Some might not last tonight, but we do have few extras in here. If anybody is interested, please, you can email us at info and we can secure an additional one. But again, thank you to both of you, all the members. Cheers. This has been such a wonderful wine tasting, and we look forward to probably bringing you back for the new edition that you are joining.
Oh, well, I'm looking forward to coming back. And I just want to thank you, Puneet, for the hospitality. And I just want to thank everyone just for coming out, just even wanting to show interest and learning more about our program.
Thanks very much.
Thank you
Thank you
so
so
much.
much.
Have a wonderful rest of the evening. Cheers.
Yeah.
Cheers.
See you, everybody. Take care.